2, 1. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So we are on the second week of the Modern Women's Health Summit. We've got 3 weeks where we're talking to experts in women's health, in nutrition, about all different topics that come up when we are trying to be healthy people in this modern world that really makes it difficult a lot of the time for us to achieve the things that we're trying to achieve. So today I am joined by Tiana Rockwell. I'm really excited for this because she speaks on a topic that I'm not very familiar with. So this will be new for you as well as for me. So Tiana has been an endurance athlete since 2009, racing mostly long course triathlon. She's competed in 4 Ironman 70.3 World Championships, which is amazing, and completed 6 Ironmans. She's an endurance sports coach and certified nutritional therapist residing in Grass Valley, California with her husband and 2 dogs, where she works privately with both local and distance clients, helping them find optimal health and peak performance. So welcome, Tiana. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. So I'm curious, you are an NTP and a triathlete. Which came first for you? Like, did you start off with an interest in nutrition or in fitness?
Interest in fitness. My dad actually is an Olympian, so I grew up with athletics being a really, really big part of our life. I think my only job as a child was to get really good grades in school and to be a good athlete. So grew up actually for 13 years as a gymnast, transitioned to soccer later in my teens, and went on to play collegiate soccer at a Division I college. And then
Wow.
a little bit of a break from sports when my husband and I moved to Northern California to start our own business. My husband is a dentist, so we were working to get his business up and running. And things kind of just started slowing down athletic-wise. We were just so focused on our business, we were neglecting that piece of our life. And that was kind of how I got back into it. And I think that's how a lot of my clients end up finding sport or their movement routine, as I just started feeling not great. I was starting to gain weight. I wasn't sleeping well. And I knew that I felt good when I was an athlete. So that was a natural piece to put back into my life. I needed to make it a priority again, and it wasn't. So in 2009, I raced my first triathlon strictly to get back into shape, just to give me something on the calendar that I had to work out for. And I fell in love with the sport, and I haven't looked back since. So I've been working out there. I had some gut issues that I was starting to experience as I started to train a little bit more and go a little bit further. And that was when I sought out a nutritionist to help me, because I really felt like a big piece of that was the food piece. Like something wasn't right. I thought I was doing things right, but I was still having a lot of gut issues. And it seemed like the longer I ran, the worse it got. So I was introduced to a local NTP here in my hometown, Victoria Lafont, who is also an instructor with NTA now and has her hands very deep in rewriting our curriculum, which I'm excited about.
Oh, cool.
It totally changed my life with just a couple small tweaks to my nutrition plan at home, which felt big at the time. But when I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, they were so doable. And it totally turned my world around. And so fitness first, nutrition second, but I fell so much in love with the work that we did. It inspired me to go back to school. So I went back to school to NTA to do nutrition for my own self. So that's my business opened in 2014, and I've not looked back since.
Awesome. So kind of giving back what you got from Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely.
How cool. And how cool that you, when you wanted to get back into working out, you just, right into the deep end doing an Ironman. So
I didn't start. I started with a local all-women sprint triathlon in 2009, and I did Ironman until 2013. So it took about 5 years of building up to get to that point, but the passion surely was there. And I knew pretty much within the first year of doing that sprint triathlon that I would want to do longer distance. But again, I really couldn't because my body wasn't responding well to the training. So, you look like when you're in the sports world, you look around at the professionals, and like when you look at the Olympics, there's people running marathons in a just a crazy fast time that clearly aren't having gut issues. And so that was kind of like, I know that this is possible. I just have to figure out what the missing link is for me. So that was where the nutrition piece came in. And it was the missing link for me, which was great.
Yeah, that's great that you found that and were able to continue. I've known a couple of people who had to just stop because they couldn't figure out that last piece.
Yeah.
So our summit this week is all about kind of women. Do you want to give us a quick overview of why we would look at fitness differently for men versus women? Is there much of a difference in that area?
Yeah, there's a big difference between men and women. Physiologically, we're just not the same. Women were really created to grow other humans, and um, we just aren't built the same as men are built. There's a doctor, her name is Dr. Stacy Sims, and she wrote a book called Roar, which I absolutely love.
Mhm.
And her tagline is "Women are not small men." And it's just so perfect for what she speaks on in her book and just for athletics in general. um, Hormones are really the messengers in our body. They're what control everything that happens, which obviously your audience knows a lot about from what you're teaching them. And as a female and as a woman, our hormones are on a really a 28-day cycle, especially if you're still in those reproductive years. And
Mhm.
men's hormones, they just don't change that quickly. It's more on a lifetime basis. So they do have changes in their life, but they're happening over decades, not over 28 days. So when we look at actual sports performance and like how we can deal with temperature changes in the air and how our own thermodynamics are working, how we can access our own fuel, like the sugar our body is storing and our own fat, that's all controlled by hormones, and it so fluctuates with women. So those are all things that we really need to pay attention to as a woman when we're trying to change if we really want to feel our best all the time.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a pretty important piece if you're, following a fitness plan, making sure that it's something that's really working for your body.
Right.
So, at what level of activity does kind of optimizing your nutrition for exercise really become beneficial? Like, is this something only for hardcore athletes, or can this help just your average woman with like a general mild exercise plan?
Yeah, I recommend it for everybody because I think, I mean, a lot, like 99% of the women that I work with are getting into it for the same reason I got into it. Like I just wasn't feeling well. And so I really wanted to feel better. I wanted to lose weight. So obviously, nutrition is a big piece of that. Even if you're not having gut issues, to be able to optimize the nutrition piece along with the exercise or the movement routine that you're adopting can be really important. So, it really, I mean, I really, really, really hate people to count calories, and it's not about calories. And we can talk more about calories in a few minutes. But when we look, we've been trained in our society to think of calories as a negative thing. Like most people are counting and they're trying to minimize their calories so that they can lose weight. And so many people are still following the philosophy of like eat less, move more in order to try to lose weight. Uh,
Yeah.
Not really a great philosophy that I like people to follow. But if you can think of it backwards as calories as a unit of energy, which is the technical definition of a calorie, then you want to make sure that you're putting enough calories into your body to actually be able to do your movement routine, even if that's just walking a mile a day or if it's trying to run a marathon. You really have to make sure that you're matching energy output to energy input in order to make sure that you feel good and are able to complete your movement routine without doing harm on your body. So you don't need to be a professional athlete for that. People that are just adopting a very basic and what they would call easy movement routine need to consider that as well.
Yeah. And I even see that too with people not trying to incorporate exercise, but women just don't eat enough a lot of times.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
We see
So,
obviously in the athletic world, we see people, women especially. I love working with women because we have this, especially women, obviously that are still in the reproductive years. We have this amazing thing that happens every month that tells us whether or not we're healthy. And
mhm.
it doesn't. You don't have to be an athlete who's overtraining to lose your cycle. A lot of women who don't have a movement routine are not supporting their body in the way that it needs to be supported, and they lose their cycle. And that is a sign that our body is not capable of bearing children, which is what, again, we were built to do. So it's an amazingly wonderful thing that we have happen every single month that tells us if what we're doing is helping or hurting us. So
Mhm.
again, you don't need to be an athlete to have that happen, but it is another piece that we put into the puzzle as women when we start a movement routine that can make our cycle go away, which is obviously not a good thing. We want to continue to cycle every month. That is what we're intended to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if you aren't trying to have kids, if that's on the horizon or, you're done having kids, your body still is going to want to do that. And so
Yeah.
that's a great thing to point out.
Yeah.
So what are some common misconceptions that you see in people that they have about optimizing their nutrition for athletic performance? Like some common myths that just really don't work for people.
There's a lot, but I think probably the main reason people come to see me is because their friend did this thing and it worked for them, and so they think it's going to work for them too. And that's something that I know. I mean, all NTPs that are and NTCs that are trained at NTA are really drilled into this bio individuality piece, which I really appreciate. So I know your clients have heard you talk about that too. One program that works for someone is not going to work for another, and that is not any different when it comes time to athletic nutrition. You really need to support your own specific body, and there's so many things to consider, like what your history is, whether you're a male or female, what age you are. We're starting to see a ton more research coming out on the gut microbiome and how our own microbiome in our own body can affect the way that we utilize energy, how we store energy and then use energy. So, I mean, even your own gut flora can really dictate whether or not a supplement or what the food you're eating is working for you or against you. So those things all come into play. So I think probably just because your friend got really great success with one diet doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. There might be some tweaks that need to happen in order for that piece to work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just knowing that can really prevent you from having so much frustration in trying the thing that your friend tried and it not working out. If you just know that you need to find out what's going to work for your body,
Right.
can really bypass a lot of frustration in that.
Yeah.
So I know that you have a superpower in kind of helping people figure out the optimal timing of their meals for better performance. Why is timing so important?
I think, well, timing is pretty critical if you're, well, for lots of reasons. One, if you're somebody who's trying to get into a movement routine because you want to lose weight or you want to change your body composition in any way, the times that we put those certain macronutrients into our diet can really make or break those results for you. But it's not any different for a professional athlete who's trying to go fast at specific times, who's trying to go long for specific times, who's trying to build muscle or lean out. All those things are controlled by our macronutrient timing. So if we can get that right, then you'll get the results that you're really looking for. But I do have a hierarchy of importance when it comes time to looking at nutrition, really, for my clients. And nutrient timing to me is the most critical for athletic performance or a movement routine, but it's definitely the low end, not the low end, but it's the last thing on the list that we look at. So when I'm looking at working with somebody, I'm really looking first at their quality of food. So are they eating, if they can afford it, organic, pastured, grass-fed, quality foods that are the right foods for their body, which might mean we might need to do food sensitivity testing or something like that, which will tell us which foods are right for them. So that's a big number one thing that we always look at. And if that's right, if they're getting that right most of the time, we'll start looking at quantity. So are they, and which we kind of talked about a few minutes ago, are they eating the right amount of food to support their lifestyle? And that is a piece of the timing piece as well, because there are days as an athlete, I take rest days. So I may not need to eat 3,500 calories on my rest day, but on a day that I'm going out and doing a really long bike ride, I'm going to have to match my energy output and input in order to feel really good and get the results I want. So timing can be big a part of that, but the quantity that we're eating is a really big piece too. So look at that for clients. The reason that they're eating, are they eating because they're depressed or they're tired? We really want people eating because they're hungry and they stop when they're satiated. So that's a big piece that we look at. Also looking at the method of eating. So are they eating over the kitchen sink? Are they eating in their car?
Yeah.
Those types of things are really important. And if they're getting that right most of the time, we're really looking at just the consistency piece. So if they're getting those four things right most of the time, I really encourage my clients to follow like an 80-20 rule of 80% of the time they're getting that quality, quantity, reason, and method of eating right. Once all those things are right most of the time, then the nutrient timing piece becomes really critical. So then we'll start tweaking with like, okay, so here's the foods that you need to eat at this specific time of day in order to fuel that workout. And then once you're done with your workout, here's the foods that would be optimal for you to eat at that time to really recover quickly and make sure you're getting ready for sleep or your next workout or whatever that is.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense to get them with a really good foundation and a baseline, just life in general, and then to optimize for performance.
Yeah, I always tell clients, the wrong food at the right time is still the wrong food. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're eating the wrong foods, it doesn't matter when you put them into your diet, it's still not right for you. So you got to figure that piece out first, and then putting them in at specific times can really, I think that's the, like you hear people, I really want to lose that last 5 pounds. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with athletes, where there's like the tweaking part at the end is the really challenging part. And this is where the nutrient timing piece, I think, is like the missing link for most people. They're eating, they may not be eating the right foods at the right times to actually get them that final result that they want.
That makes a lot of sense, because that last 5 pounds can be really difficult, as for women especially, to help their body release that.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you have different strategies that work best for different kinds of exercise, or is it all the same whether you're doing kind of strength training or more endurance cardio exercise?
They're definitely different. So on a very basic level, I mean, if you're an endurance-based athlete, your nutrition plan your general like 10,000 view nutrition plan will be a lot different than if you were like a strength-based athlete, someone doing CrossFit or trying to gain lean muscle for a sport like that. The plans will definitely be different. Again, on a micro level, obviously endurance athletes do strength training and strength-based athletes do some endurance stuff. So there's ways that we can tweak the diet to work for both of those types of activities. But definitely, for example, like a strength-based athlete, when it comes to nutrient timing, we're really prioritizing protein. Becomes like one of the more important macronutrients for them, because if we're trying to build muscle, obviously protein is the macronutrient that's really helping us do that. And so
Sure.
there's a lot of research that shows that if you're trying to build muscle, eating protein on a regular basis throughout the day can be really important. And I know you've talked to clients before about digestion. So obviously it's not about what we're eating, but it's about what we're digesting. So that comes again on one of those priority things of if a client's not digesting their foods very well, then obviously you can eat all of it you want. It's not going to help you. So assuming digestion is right, then prioritizing protein every 3 to 4 hours during the day is really going to help them stay in that building phase. Where for an endurance athlete, we're really starting to prioritize more like carbohydrates and fats as fuels, because that's depending on their heart rate and what distance they're doing. You really can play with those macronutrients quite easily to help them go longer and recover faster. So the types of macronutrients we're looking at for specific athletes is different.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So we kind of touched on the fact that the food itself is definitely important, as well as timing. And I know that you teach keto for athletes. Do you want to give kind of a brief overview for people who maybe have heard the term but aren't familiar with what it is, kind of what keto is and why it would be beneficial for athletic performance?
Yeah, so technically the ketogenic diet is basically a diet where you're actually producing ketones. That's how it got its name, ketogenic diet. And a ketone is a byproduct of fat metabolism. So if you're actually burning fat as your primary fuel source and you're not eating a lot of sugars, your body will start producing ketones, which basically act like sugar in the body. They can cross the blood-brain barrier and feed the brain. They can be fed to the muscles. A lot of the organs obviously can use ketone bodies. So a technical ketogenic diet means that you're actually producing ketone bodies. So there is a big difference between a ketogenic diet and a low carb, high fat diet, which are both techniques that I use with clients. A low carb, high fat diet is basically just eating less carbohydrate than what traditional sports nutrition has taught us in the past, of like needing to carb load. You have to eat all this pasta the night before, or else you're never
very high.
Yeah, so a low carb, high fat diet is just eating less carbohydrate and more fat, so that your body is more efficient at what we call being metabolically flexible. So you're
Okay.
able to burn fat and sugar rather than just sugar. So traditional sugar burners are really relying on sugar, and because sugar is such a fast and hot burning macronutrient, we have to put it in quite regularly. So
Mhm.
typically people are sugar burners. Like one of the really easy ways to know if you're a sugar burner is if you're a grazer. So if you're someone who needs to eat frequently throughout the day, like every 1 to 2 hours you have to snack on something, that's a
Yeah.
pretty good indication that you're a sugar burner, because those fuels are burning quickly. Fat burners typically can go really, really long periods of time without needing food. So we're looking at people that can go easily 6 to 8 hours between meals, and that because their body's burning their own stored fat, it makes it pretty easy for them to do that. They're not hungry, they're not hangry, like they don't get any of those symptoms. So it's important for athletes to look at becoming more metabolically flexible, because we have a very limited storage of sugar in our body. So
Mhm.
you're trying to adopt an exercise or a movement routine, and that movement routine you're hoping at some point may go longer than 90 minutes, you're really going to run out of sugar in your body. So we only have about 90 minutes to 2 hours worth of sugar stored in our body. It ends up being about 2,000 calories for most people. And when you're a sugar burner and that's your only source of energy, then in 90 minutes to 2 hours, you're going to be out of energy. That's the bonk that a lot of people talk about when they talk about running.
Yeah.
So that is not obviously ideal. And again, most people come to me because they want to be able to be more efficient with their exercise, the less food we have to consume while we're training, the less GI distress you're potentially going to get, which is nice.
Sure.
If you're a woman who just is adopting an exercise routine or a movement routine because you want to lose fat, then you need to be able to tap into your own fat stores to be able to burn through that. So being able to access your fat as energy is great. And even the leanest human being has like 80,000 calories worth of fat stored in their body. So we have a tremendous amount of energy, calories there that we could burn as an energy source, that it would be really nice for people to be able to tap into without having to like constantly feed themselves sugar. So there's the strategy that I typically use with clients who are interested in tapping into their own fat to be able to utilize that as energy to burn fat, but also just to not have to graze all the time and risk that,
Mhm.
is to put them into a ketogenic state for a period of time. So I typically ask clients, or I run a program with private clients, to drop them into ketosis for about 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the type of athlete that they are or the type of whatever their goals are that they're trying to do. We can measure this with a ketone meter, so kind of like a blood sugar meter where you'd prick your finger and get a little blood spot. It's the same thing with the ketone meter. It will tell you whether or not your body's actually producing ketones, which tells us that the diet is working, and lifestyle, because there's a lot of things in our life that can keep us from going into ketosis, like stress. So those are all things
Sure.
we need to look at. But then once they've dropped into ketosis for a period of time and the body, we can see, is burning fat as fuel easily, we actually will transition them over to a low carb, high fat diet. So the difference again being that they may not be producing ketone bodies anymore, but then they're able to access fat as fuel and burn sugar very easily as fuel, which I find to be the best state for most people to be in,
Mhm.
because they can go long periods of time without needing to eat. They're burning through maybe that extra 5 pounds of fat that they really want to lose. It makes it pretty easy to be able to burn through that, which is what a lot of people want. And I find that people have the most energy in that state. So the flip side, and I guess again, something just to bring up, staying in ketosis for long periods of time is really helpful if you have a metabolic condition that requires that. So like the ketogenic diet was discovered in the 20s for the cure for epilepsy before we had medication to do that. So any of the neurodegenerative diseases, like if you have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's in your family, and that's something that really concerns you, staying ketogenic, actually producing ketone bodies, can be really beneficial in that state. But for athletes specifically, I find that a lot of athletes, especially endurance athletes or um, very driven athletes who are trying to perform, have a lot of stress in their life just from their sport alone. I mean, the sport may be something that they absolutely love, but any way you slice it, it's still a stress on the body. So when you're putting yourself into a state of ketosis, 24/7, that also can be a stress in partnership with high intensity interval work.
Mhm.
So that is a kind of a recipe for adrenal fatigue, thyroid issues. And so that's why we tend to transition specific athletes who are trying to be high performers and who are doing some more intense training into a more low carb, high fat diet, because those carbohydrates are really required for them to reach those high intensities that they're really looking for. So again, kind of going back to that original point, bioindividuality. If you're a woman who's like wanting to walk or run a 5K or do a 10K, or maybe even transition at some point in your life, maybe to doing a half marathon, you may never need to eat tons of carbohydrates, and you might be able to stay ketogenic and stay healthy. But if you're looking to do something longer than that, it might be beneficial to cycle in and out of ketosis and use carbohydrates strategically with your workouts to stay optimally healthy, which is the goal in the end anyway. No client should ever prioritize sports performance over overall health. Like, my goal for all my clients is when they're 80, I want them to be able to choose to do their sport. I don't want that to have been taken away from them because of unhealthy things they did in their youth that are now preventing them from being able to do the thing that they love when they're older. So overall health, first priority, sports performance, second, in my opinion.
Absolutely. That's so important to remember, is that a short-term gain right now is not worth it if it's going to cost you something in the long run.
Right.
Yeah, there were so many important little points in that. So I wanted to make sure everyone got this, that even if you technically can push yourself to like have a longer window in between meals, if you're getting those symptoms of being hangry, you're still in that sugar burning mode.
Absolutely.
Because I've had people say, no, I can make it until lunch. I can do enough time in between. But if you are driving everybody crazy in that time, it's not working.
It actually comes quite natural. So when you actually transition your body from a sugar burning state to a fat burning state, like when you actually do a low carb, high fat diet, or you transition to a ketogenic diet, a lot of my clients at the beginning, when I tell them, eventually you're going to go, like, you'll have to remind yourself to eat. Like, you may need timers eventually because you don't want to forget to eat. Again, energy in and energy out kind of thing. And they're like, there's no way that's ever going to happen. I like, how could you go hours without eating? But it just does. It happens naturally. And so I never, ever recommend anybody forcing it to happen. Like, you should never be forcing yourself. Really, what you're doing in that state is starving yourself. You should never be starving yourself. If you are trying to adopt an intermittent fasting type of diet, then it again is my opinion that you need to be doing the steps to get yourself into a fat burning state so that your body will naturally your diet will naturally turn to intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I see that with my husband. I have to remind him to eat or he will not eat ever.
Yeah. And it becomes an issue. That's, again, that adrenal piece. And we see it so much with athletes, not just high fat eating athletes, but just athletes in general, where when you put yourself into a state of stress, cortisol, one of the things cortisol does is it suppresses appetite. So if you are burning cortisol when you're working out. So for these athletes who are working out multiple times a day, they're suppressing their appetite multiple times a day, and it becomes really easy to forget to eat. But if you're burning a ton of calories and you're not replacing most of those calories, like 90 to 95% of them, you're risking adrenal fatigue, and your sports career will be over with really quickly, which is not what people want. So longevity, we got to think of that piece when we're looking at all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there a certain kind of person that this works really well for? I know you mentioned if you do have some kind of metabolic issue going on, being in ketosis can be really helpful. But for kind of your average person, is this something that, like, are there any reasons that you would not have someone do low carb, high fat, or keto?
I think like on a very basic level, it is a very challenging diet to adopt for most people at the beginning. And I will say I've been following a cyclical ketogenic diet, so a low carb, high fat diet and a ketogenic diet, really since about 2013. And at first, like for the first year or two, it felt so challenging. Like, I felt like I really had to think about a lot of things. But now it's actually like I find that when I get stressed out, I want to default back to the ketogenic diet because now it's the most simple diet that I can follow. So
Mhm.
I think at the beginning it takes potentially years for people to like fine tune it and to feel like it's easy. So it's definitely not like a quick fix. So for somebody who's like, I say has a short attention span, who wants something really quickly, this is not the diet for them. It's something that you want to stick with for a long period of time. So food prep becomes pretty critical because it's hard to eat out when you're keto. I mean, starting
Yeah.
with everything, sugars and everything, even if it's organic, like 80% of the food that we consume has sugar in it. So that will kick you out of low carb, high fat, ketogenic state pretty quickly. So you have to like food prep in order to maintain a diet like this. So for somebody who just doesn't have access to a kitchen or doesn't like to spend time in the kitchen, that would be step one. Like, let's start again, adopting a lifestyle that involves more food prep, or find a company that's willing to do some food prep for you, or somebody who can bring it to the home. Those things are all a big piece before you would step into that ketogenic state.
Yeah.
From an actual health perspective, if a client comes to me and is missing a gallbladder, that's something
Okay. Yep.
consider, because obviously the gallbladder is what's helping break down fats. So there would be some supplement recommendations that I would be making if they're really wanting to do a high fat diet. We really got to look again, overall health first. So if you're missing the organ that helps you break down fats, a high fat diet may not be the perfect fit right away. So those are some things to consider for sure. And I think probably also, I do work with some clients who are coming from a vegan diet, and it's really challenging to transition to a ketogenic diet. It's not impossible, but a vegan diet is essentially eliminating a big portion of one of our three macronutrients. So
Yeah.
typically you're not eating a lot of the proteins that non-vegans are traditionally eating. So they've already eliminated a big part of that macronutrient. And then to drop ketogenic diet is basically eliminating a big macronutrient of carbohydrate. So it's not that we're not eating carbs, we're eating a ton of vegetables, but we're not eating a lot of starches. So vegans can struggle a lot with that because they're not eating a lot of the macronutrient protein, and then they're not eating a lot of the macronutrient carbohydrate. It's just so limiting, which is not a good diet for anyone, is an overly limited diet. So those would probably be the big things I would consider when talking to somebody about whether or not a ketogenic or a low carb high fat diet is the right diet for them, things to look at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that brings it back to the bio individuality. Just because it worked for your friend doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you if you happen to even have a combination, if you're a vegan who doesn't have a gallbladder.
Oh, right. Yeah,
which would be a little extreme.
Yeah.
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 So what advice do you have for someone who is interested in getting started with keto, or even just the idea of low carb, high fat? Is there kind of a starting point that's good for people new to this?
Yeah, I think probably the best advice I would have is get into some type of support group. So, if you're the type of personality who likes to have physical support, like if you like to go to the gym and work out in group like activities, having a physical support group can be really helpful. So, check in with a local nutritionist in your area to see if they're running any type of support groups, or if they have any classes, small group classes you can join. But if you're not someone that likes to go face to face with people necessarily, there are so many online support groups now for keto.
Mhm.
I just find that there are so many questions at the beginning, like there is with anything that you would do that's new, to be able to reach out to friends or a nutritionist or a support group to ask, like, hey, is this normal? Like, one of the most common things that will happen for people transitioning to keto is they start cramping. Like, it's so common for people to wake up in the middle of the night with calf or feet cramps.
Oh,
See that our body, it's happening because one of the many jobs insulin has beyond storing sugar is it's basically signaling the kidneys to retain sodium. So when you eliminate sugar from your diet or reduce it drastically, insulin is no longer signaling all the time, and then the kidneys will start dumping sodium. So then all of a sudden the way our body is handling electrolytes is so different than when it was when we were a sugar burner. So that surprises a lot of people, the amount of salt they need to take in on a day-to-day basis when they transition to a ketogenic diet. So like those types of questions, it's just nice to have somebody to help you answer those things. So the
Mm-hmm.
support group piece is really, really big.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because even in general health, there are a lot of things that can happen that, can be a little nerve-wracking if you don't know to expect them, or if you don't have someone to ask and you're just trying to Google for answers. You can find some unsettling information that may not be helpful in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm sure people kind of understand the concept of getting energy from your food. And I'm glad you mentioned that earlier, and that calories really is just a unit of energy, and how we measure it. How important is nutrient density in athletic performance as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, it kind of falls into my like number one of hierarchy when we look at quality first. So, I talk to my clients about naked foods. So they typically tend to be processed foods where all the nutrients are stripped away, and then a lot of times are maybe added back in a synthetic form a lot of times. So it's just really hard for the body to be able to utilize synthetic forms of vitamins and nutrients. And so it's just adding additional stress for our body to try to get those things out of those foods. So nutrient density, obviously, when you're burning a lot of calories in your day-to-day life, whether it's through exercise or stress or whatever that is, the more nutrient dense your food is, the better off you're going to be, obviously. Um, Kind of like look at like milk for one example. The nice thing about, I guess, the quality piece is it's actually a really quite an easy swap for most people. So most people, when they're looking at talking to a nutritionist, most people don't want an entire revamp. Like, this is a lot of work to just do something totally new. So
Mm-hmm.
most people like to start with like, give me 3 really easy things I can do today to make a difference in my overall health. And this is probably one of the easiest, is like swapping food for food, of a naked food with a more nutrient dense food. So milk is a really good one. So if like someone comes to me and they're drinking like a process, like a homogenized pasteurized 2% milk, even if it's organic, if they have access to something like raw milk, then we're taking and just swapping that out to a raw whole milk. They're getting all the probiotics. They're getting all those good quality fatty acids. They're getting legitimate vitamin D3 instead of synthetic vitamin D2. All by
Yeah.
just swapping, like when you run out of your 2%, just swap to a whole raw milk. That swap is easy and makes a huge difference in people's energy level, what they have access to. So those types of things, I think it's an easy thing to swap for people when they talk to somebody who knows like these 3 things can be easily swapped for a more nutrient dense food, and then they'll feel better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And the raw dairy too is becoming easier to find these days. So that's definitely within the realm of possibility for a lot of people listening.
Right.
And we can link, for anyone who's curious about that, I'll link to a website where you can kind of search your zip code and see if there are some farms near you, to find some good dairy.
Which is so great. I heard, I saw on a forum the other day, and I'm in California, and so it is technically illegal to sell raw milk in California, but like Whole Foods even sells raw milk. So I'm not exactly sure what the loophole is on that, but it's pretty easy to access raw milk in California now. But I saw a link on a forum of a lot of people getting their raw milk from pet stores, because you can sell raw milk as like dog nutrient, like dog milk basically for your animals. So a lot of humans were getting it that way, which I found really interesting. So yeah, I'd be curious to see your website when you link that as well, because getting it from a trusted source, not that it's not trusted from a pet food store, but it's interesting how people are finding ways to get nutrient dense food now.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I had never thought about that. I don't think I knew that pet stores did that. Yeah, and it's different state by state. Like, I know here in Texas, it's been a while since I've looked at the actual rule, but I don't, I think that you have to, in most places, go to the farm to get it. Like, there are some states where you can't, get it at a grocery store, but if you go to the farm, you can buy it there, that kind of thing. So yeah, so I'll link to a good resource, and it's nationwide. So wherever you are, you can see what's around. And then I think it also searches for like meat and vegetable CSAs and all of that.
That's such a great way to introduce yourself to new vegetables and have variety kind of stuff. So nice.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really how I got started just eating healthier. Was I started going to the farmer's market and looking at the eggplants and being like, that's weird. What can I do with that? And then you learn how to cook an eggplant. And
Yep.
so I wanted to add on a question here for some of the people watching who know that they need to be exercising. They know that fitness is important. But there's a lot of complaints these days with fatigue. There are so many issues in our modern society that cause fatigue. What advice do you have for someone who knows they need to be exercising, but just is dealing with that exhaustion day to day?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to always be working towards figuring out what the root cause of the fatigue is. So if that means working with a professional, I mean, if your thyroid is sluggish and you need to have some nutrients in your diet or via supplement to actually support your thyroid, that kind of stuff is really important, because obviously if you're fatigued because of a stressor, adding in exercise on top of that is not necessarily going to help with your fatigue.
Yeah.
So always working with somebody on that root cause is really important. But if you know that the exercise piece is an important piece that you need to add in, I typically tell my clients to schedule time, if they can, the time that they know that they feel the best during the day. So it's actually the same rule I have for clients when they go to the grocery store, when they know that they're tempted to stray from their grocery store list. Like, we all have times in the day when we have more willpower or we're stronger. So doing the things that are really important to you during that time of day is really important. So like, I know at 9 o'clock in the morning, I don't have chocolate cravings. And so I'm not going to buy a bar of chocolate at the grocery store at 9 a.m. So I'm going to go do all my grocery shopping at 9 a.m. because I can stick to my list and get in and out. Same thing with exercise. So if you know that like in the morning is a time that you feel more energy or more up and about and more active, that would be the perfect time to schedule a walk, schedule something with a friend, schedule an exercise, something, but really get it on your schedule so that you can do that. Waiting, if fatigue is a big piece for you, waiting till the end of the day to do your exercise routine is probably one of the hardest things you're going to do, because it's just hard at the end of the day when you're tired. So the other thing I would recommend, actually, there's a book called The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. And have you guys talked about that before?
I haven't talked about it on Facebook actually in a long time. But yeah, that's a great resource.
I really love that book. And so I tell a lot of people it's a great, and they have it on audio so you can listen to it. But it's nice to know how you will tend to build habits. So if you are trying to build a new habit of exercise and it's really hard for you because you're tired all the time, knowing if you are an obliger, for example, and that you're going to be motivated by a group, then join a gym that has group exercise and like get to know somebody and have an accountability partner. Like, that's going to be such a big piece for you. So those types of things can also be helpful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if anyone will link to that as well. They also have, Gretchen Rubin has a little quiz online. So you could do the quiz and find out what your tendency is, and then grab the book to get a little more in depth on how you can apply this to your life.
Yeah.
What tendency are you?
I'm an upholder. So
okay.
Which it doesn't surprise me that I call myself an educator now. I'm a nutritionist, so I'm a teacher. And I think for me personally, the group stuff doesn't necessarily motivate me. It's not that I don't like being in a group, but I need to educate myself to know why it's so important to do something, and then I will do it. So once I know the facts behind it, I'm all in. So
that sounds a little bit like a questioner. Got a little.
I have, yeah.
You go in there.
When you do it, you'll see like nobody is, well, I shouldn't say nobody's 100% anything, but we all have tendencies that lean towards other things. So I have a little bit of obliger and a little bit of questioner in me as well. So I'm sure those things come out.
Yeah. But knowing that about yourself can make such a difference, you know, when you're trying to figure out how to make this crazy thing called health work.
Right. Yep.
So before I let you go, Halloween is coming up at the end of the month. And the holiday is all about candy and sugar and overindulging. So do you have any tips for everyone listening to have a healthier Halloween this year?
Yeah. So my husband is also a dentist. So this is a hard holiday for us in both professions. But I always recommend people look online. There is a website and you can link to it. I think it's called HalloweenCandyBuyback.com. But if you Google Halloween candy buyback programs. That website will come up top on the list in Google. But there are a lot of companies, a lot of dentists do it, but there are a lot of businesses that will offer the days after Halloween a candy buyback program. So they'll encourage kids to come back and they'll buy like candy for $1 a pound back, and then they either donate it or potentially throw it away. But the program is really intended to be donated to like our servicemen and women that are overseas that don't get to celebrate those types of holidays. But having that scheduled, like, okay, so Halloween is on the 31st. If you are one that gets trick-or-treaters at your house and you're going to have candy in your home, having an opportunity to get rid of it ASAP afterwards is going to be really critical. So look that up. And then if you can afford it and time still allows, I always recommend my clients not purchase candy for trick-or-treaters and instead look for, like on Amazon, you can get little toys that are not expensive, but they're like the fidget toys or the little Rubik's Cube, something like that, that kids actually really love. And it's going to last a lot longer than a piece of candy would. They may play with it for weeks. So if that's something that you can afford to purchase instead of candy, it's just less tempting for you to have it in your home. So those are probably the two biggest tips I have.
Absolutely. Those are great. And for anyone who has like if they're in their PTA at school or something like that, if you can set up something like a candy buyback program for your community, that would be amazing to just help get the candy off the streets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for this. This has been enlightening for me, and I'm sure for our listeners as well. So I will go back through everything we talked about and link to all of the resources. I'll just edit this post so that everyone can find them at the top.
Great. It's been a pleasure to be here. I've had a lot of fun talking with you today. And if anyone has any questions, they're free to reach out.
Yes. Can you give us your website, and are you on Facebook or Instagram? Where can people connect with you?
Yeah. So my Instagram handle is TryRealFood. It's TRI like triathlon. And my website is the same. It's the same, tryrealfood.com. So people can reach out to me that way. And I'm Tiana Rockwell on Facebook. So
awesome. Which is the cutest name. When I saw your logo, I was like, Triathlete.
That's thank you.
All right. And I'll add those to the links in the comments as well so that everyone can connect with Tiana.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me today. It's been fun.
Yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.